The desperate call, Immerse's empire. It was a quiet day on Earth when the message first arrived. It wasn't anything extraordinary to begin with. A strange signal, a whisper from the far reaches of space. The type of signal that could be dismissed as mere static or interference. But as hours passed, a few scientists, working late in their labs, picked up the strange transmission. The signal wasn't just random noise. It had purpose. It was a call. The message, barely audible at first, slowly became clearer as they fine-tuned their equipment. It came from a distant part of the galaxy, a sector humans had never explored. Earth had no way of knowing who was out there, what species might have sent it, or why they had chosen this moment to reach out. But the message was clear enough. Help. The people who discovered it were not the most senior scientists, but young, eager minds who saw an opportunity where others saw only risk. One of them, Dr. Linda Everett, stood at the control console, her fingers frozen on the keys as she listened to the plea. "Help us," the voice whispered, almost like a plea from the depths of a dying world. "We are the Zorath. Our empire is falling. If you hear us, please, respond." The message was sent from a distant world, located in the uncharted corners of the galaxy, beyond the reach of Earth's most powerful telescopes. No one knew where this Zorath empire had come from. No one knew how they had fallen, or how they had come to be in such a desperate state. But one thing was certain. Someone, or something, was asking for help. "Do you think we should respond?" Dr. Everett's colleague, a cautious scientist named Thomas, asked, his voice shaky as he stood beside her. The words on the screen flickered. The Zorath Empire was in a state of emergency. Something terrible had happened to their world, and they were on the brink of collapse. It could be a trap, Thomas warned, his face pale as he stared at the readout. Linda was quiet for a moment, unsure of what to do. The message wasn't just a simple distress signal. It was a call for survival. This wasn't a message from a distant alien civilization seeking trade or diplomacy. This was different. This was a species at the end of its rope. She knew the risks. The unknowns were terrifying, and Earth had never faced anything like this before. Still, her curiosity got the best of her. This wasn't just about science. This was about a chance to understand something larger than humanity itself. There was so much to discover in this moment, too much to let it slip away. "We have to respond," Linda said, her voice steady despite the fear rising inside her. "We need to know who they are. We need to see what they want." The decision was made. Within hours, Earth's space agencies worked in unison to send a response back. It wasn't much, just a simple message of acknowledgement, one that would be understood by any civilization with the capability to send such an advanced signal. "We hear you. We are listening." For a brief moment, everything was silent. And then, the reply came. The Zorath were not alone in their galaxy. Their empire was vast, much larger than Earth could have imagined. The response that came back was unexpected, and humanity wasn't prepared for it. They had expected fear. They had expected suspicion. What they didn't expect was this: "We are coming for you." The message wasn't a threat. It was something else. It was a challenge. The Zorath had sent out their plea for help not out of desperation alone, but because they had something to prove. They needed help, yes. But more than that, they needed something that Earth couldn't yet understand. A way to survive. And they believed humanity held the key. The reaction on Earth was immediate. News outlets across the globe broadcast the message, some with fear, others with excitement. Governments scrambled to understand what this meant. A species in crisis, an unknown empire, a challenge from the stars. What did it all mean? And why had the Zorath chosen Earth? Some experts speculated that the Zorath saw humanity as a potential ally, a species that could help them rebuild their crumbling empire. Others worried it was a ruse, a ploy to trick Earth into some kind of dangerous alliance or trap. But one thing was certain: humanity could not ignore this message. Whether it was a plea for mercy or a dangerous game, It was a signal that no one could dismiss. For the first time, humanity had a chance to interact with an alien species, but what they didn't know was that this opportunity came with a hidden price. The Zorath were not the helpless, dying empire they appeared to be. And soon, humanity would find itself standing at the crossroads of a galactic challenge that no one on Earth had ever imagined. The question remained, would humanity answer the call? The first encounter. The response from humanity was swift, but the decision was not an easy one. Governments, military leaders, and scientists all around the world gathered in secret meetings to discuss the implications of the alien message. There was no precedent for such an encounter. No one knew whether the Zorath were peaceful or hostile. The risk of responding to an unknown civilization was enormous, but ignoring it was even riskier. Dr. Linda Everett and Thomas were among the few scientists who had direct contact with the message. As the experts worked to decode the alien technology, Linda couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching them. The Zorath had responded quickly, and the tone of their message hinted at something more than just desperation. It was as if they were waiting for humanity's move. But why? "We need to prepare for all possibilities," said Dr. Everett, her voice steady as she addressed the world's top leaders via a global video conference. "We cannot be sure of their intentions, but we can't afford to let this opportunity slip. If the Zorath are coming, we need to know why and how." Her words hung in the air as representatives from every corner of Earth debated. Some argued that responding meant committing to an uncertain fate, while others saw it as a chance to take humanity's place among the stars. The Zorath had challenged them. This was no ordinary first contact. This was a direct invitation to step into something larger than Earth, larger than anything humanity had ever known. As the discussion continued, a plan began to take shape. Humanity would not wait idly. They would send a delegation, a team of experts and representatives who would meet with the Zorath in person. But there was a catch. The Zorath were many light years away, and Earth's fastest spacecraft were not yet capable of such long-distance travel. That's when the world's greatest minds came together, pooling their resources and expertise to build a ship capable of reaching the Zorath Empire. The project was top secret and was carried out under the highest levels of security. Within months, the first ship designed to make the long journey was completed. The ship was unlike anything the world had ever seen. It was sleek, black, and equipped with state-of-the-art technology that no one fully understood yet. It had the power to make the journey across the stars in a matter of weeks, far quicker than any spacecraft before it. The day the ship was ready to launch, the world held its breath. The crew, selected for their bravery, intelligence, and resourcefulness, gathered at the launch site. Among them was Dr. Everett, who would be the one to represent humanity. She was anxious, but her resolve was strong. This was humanity's chance to prove that they were capable of standing on equal ground with alien civilizations. As the countdown to launch began, the tension was palpable. The crew was trained, prepared, and equipped, but no one truly knew what awaited them. Would they encounter a race of beings willing to cooperate, or would they find a species hostile to their existence? The spaceship's engines roared to life, and the world watched in awe as it ascended into the sky, breaking through Earth's atmosphere and into the vastness of space. Dr. Everett looked out the window, her thoughts racing. She couldn't shake the feeling that they were walking into a trap, yet there was also a sense of hope, the possibility of a future where humanity could rise to the challenge. As the spacecraft hurtled through the stars, the crew entered a state of tense anticipation. They had no idea what they would find when they reached the Zorath Empire. But one thing was certain. They were about to face an encounter that would change humanity's destiny forever. Back on Earth, governments and citizens alike waited for news. The world held its breath, knowing that whatever happened in the coming days would alter the course of history. The first true contact with an alien race was no longer just a possibility. It was happening. The ship raced toward its destination, and as the days passed, the crew began to notice something strange on their sensors. The Zorath had made a decision. They were waiting. But for what? It was clear that this was no ordinary meeting. The tension in the air was thick, and Dr. Everett knew that the moment they arrived, everything would change. Would the Zorath greet them as allies? Or would this meeting mark the beginning of an unknown conflict? The unknowns weighed heavily on everyone aboard the ship, but they had no choice but to press forward. As the stars stretched out before them, the crew realized that their mission had just begun, and that they were about to uncover secrets that could either save humanity or doom them. And then, just as they neared the Zorath's home planet, the signal cut through their communications. It was a single word, spoken in perfect English. Welcome. The crew exchanged uncertain glances. It was the moment they had been waiting for. The true test was about to begin. The unexpected answer. As the spaceship continued its journey toward the Zorath Empire, the crew's tension grew with each passing day. The crew members tried to stay focused, but doubt and uncertainty clouded their minds. Would the Zorath be as advanced and dangerous as they seemed, or was there something more beneath the surface? No one knew for sure. Dr. Linda Everett stood at the front of the ship's command deck, staring out into the void. Her thoughts were a mixture of excitement and fear. She had worked for years on this mission, but now that the moment was upon them, she couldn't help but wonder what awaited them on the other side. This wasn't just about meeting an alien species. This was a turning point for humanity, a chance to prove their place in the universe, but it also carried immense risks. The crew's sensors picked up a massive presence ahead, something far larger than anything they had encountered before. The Zorath planet, its size dwarfing that of Earth, loomed before them. Their planet had a dark, foreboding atmosphere, surrounded by swirling clouds of dust and gases. From a distance, it looked like a world on the brink of collapse. "Captain, we're approaching their atmosphere," Thomas, the ship's communications officer, reported nervously. "We should be prepared for anything." Linda nodded, taking a deep breath. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to go terribly wrong. This wasn't just a meeting between two civilizations. This was a gamble. If the Zorath were anything like what the reports suggested, their empire was in the midst of total collapse. They were desperate, but also proud. And they could just as easily see humanity as a potential threat as they could an ally. Suddenly, their ship's comms system flickered, and a voice broke through the static. It was in English, but the tone was calm and cold, almost mechanical. "We welcome you, humans. You have responded to our call. But we did not ask for help alone." The voice sent a chill through the crew. It wasn't just a response, it was something more. The Zorath were not simply asking for help. They were demanding something, and they hadn't revealed their true intentions. Linda's heart raced. This wasn't the peaceful meeting they had imagined. The Zorath had been waiting for them, but for what? As the ship continued its descent, the crew noticed that the landscape of the Zorath world wasn't just barren, it was broken. Cities that had once stretched across the planet were now in ruins, their structures shattered and half destroyed. There was no sign of civilization as they approached, only the haunting silence of a world in crisis. Yet the Zorath had clearly made contact with Earth, not to beg for survival, but to show off their power, or perhaps to test humanity's strength. "What do you mean by that?" Linda spoke into the comms, trying to steady her voice. The response was immediate, almost too quick. "We will show you the truth. We have failed in our conquest, and we are on the brink of extinction. But you, humans, you are something different. You are strong, stronger than any empire in the galaxy. You are what we need." At that moment, Linda realized the full scale of what they were facing. The Zorath were not asking for help as they had first claimed. They were challenging humanity. They saw humanity's potential and wanted it for themselves. In the cold silence of space, Linda understood. The Zorath were offering an alliance, not out of kindness, but because they were desperate to survive. And humanity had something they lacked, something the Zorath could never achieve on their own: "Prepare for landing," the captain said. "This is it." The ship descended, entering the atmosphere of the Zoreth planet. The alien world loomed large below them, its shattered cities casting long shadows over the cracked surface. The crew's hearts pounded, knowing that the next few minutes would decide the future of humanity. As they landed, the crew quickly made their way to the ship's exit. The door opened with a soft hiss, and the crew stepped out onto the surface of the Zoreth homeworld. To their surprise, there were no grand ceremonies, no welcoming crowds. Instead, they found themselves standing in front of a vast, dark structure, what appeared to be a fortress. The air around them was thick with a strange energy, and the ground beneath their feet trembled. And then they saw them, the Zoreth. The aliens were unlike anything humanity had imagined. They stood tall and imposing, with smooth, dark skin and glowing eyes that seemed to pierce through the darkness. Their bodies were covered in intricate, shining armor, and they moved with a grace and power that suggested they had once been an unstoppable force. But now, their faces held an expression of something deeper: fear, desperation, and perhaps even regret. "We are the Zoreth," one of the aliens said, his voice deep and resonant. "And we have come to you not for your mercy, but for your strength." Linda's heart raced. This was not a simple first contact. This was a test, a challenge. The Zoreth were looking at humanity as something they had never expected to find, a species that might be stronger, more resilient, and more capable than they ever thought possible. This was no longer about helping the Zoreth survive. It was about what humanity would choose to do with this newfound power. Would they accept the challenge? Would they take the Zoreth's offer and join them in their struggle? Or would they turn their backs on a dying empire, seeing it as nothing more than a dangerous trap? The crew stood on the brink of a decision that would echo throughout the galaxy, a decision that would shape the future of humanity, and perhaps even the fate of the universe itself. The aliens' response. The Zoreth stood before the crew of the human ship, their alien forms imposing and powerful, yet their eyes revealed something else: fear. The crew had been expecting a grand greeting, a peaceful introduction, but what they received instead was a challenge. The Zoreth weren't just asking for help, they were testing humanity. They wanted to see if Earth's people had what it took to stand beside them, not as allies, but as equals. Dr. Linda Everett's heart raced. This was far from the peaceful meeting she had imagined. The Zoreth's cold, calculating gaze felt like a weight pressing down on her chest. They were not desperate in the way humanity had assumed. No, the Zoreth were proud, their power still immense despite the crumbling state of their empire. The leader of the Zoreth, a tall and stoic being whose face was hidden behind a dark, ornate helmet, spoke again. "You have come from Earth, a young, fragile planet. We have watched you for centuries as you struggled and grew. You are like us. Your species is strong. But you are not yet fully awakened. You do not yet understand your place in the universe." The words sent a chill through the crew. The Zoreth had been observing Earth. They had seen humanity's wars, its rise from the ashes, its strength. But they had also seen the weaknesses, the divisions, the self-destructive tendencies. Yet the Zoreth still saw something in humanity that they believed could change the course of galactic history. "We need your strength," the leader continued, his voice soft but firm. "Our empire has faltered. Our enemies have wiped us from the stars. But you have the potential to do what we could not. Join us, and together, we can reclaim our place at the top of the galaxy. We will give you power, wealth, knowledge, everything you need to thrive, but only if you prove yourselves worthy of it." Linda exchanged uneasy glances with the rest of the crew. The Zoreth were offering more than an alliance. They were offering power. And that was a dangerous thing. To join forces with such a species would change everything. The crew had not come here to conquer or dominate. They had come to learn. But now, they were being presented with a choice that could alter the fate of Earth forever. "We have something you want," Linda said, her voice steady despite the pounding of her heart. "But what do we gain from this? You speak of power and wealth, but what is the cost? What do we give up in exchange?" The Zorath leader tilted his head slightly, as if considering her words. "The cost? Your loyalty. Your trust. You must believe in our cause. Only by joining us can you hope to survive the coming war. The universe is full of powerful enemies, and they will not stop until all who stand against them are destroyed. You must choose. Will you fight for your survival, or will you fall like the countless other species that have perished at the hands of our enemies?" Linda's mind raced as she considered their words. The Zorath were not offering Earth a simple partnership. They were asking for total allegiance, for humanity to commit itself to their cause. And if the Zorath were as powerful as they claimed, aligning with them could ensure humanity's safety. But was that the right choice? Would joining the Zorath come with strings attached that Earth couldn't see yet? Thomas, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "And if we refuse? If we choose not to ally ourselves with you? What then?" The Zorath leader's eyes, glowing faintly beneath his helmet, fixed on Thomas with an unreadable expression. "Then you will be left to fend for yourselves. Alone. In a galaxy that is growing more dangerous by the day, your survival will depend on your own strength, and that of your people. But without us, you will have no chance against the darkness that is coming." A tense silence fell over the group. The crew was trapped in a moral dilemma. The Zorath were offering power, but at what cost? Would they be enslaved to the Empire's whims, or would they be able to retain their independence? And what would humanity lose in the process? "Give us time," Linda said at last, the weight of the decision heavy on her shoulders. "We need time to consider your offer. This is not something we can decide in a moment." The Zorath leader nodded, his gaze intense but understanding. "You have until dawn. If you do not respond, we will assume your answer is no, and we will leave. But know this, time is not on your side. The darkness comes for all of us." With that, the Zorath turned and walked away, their armored forms disappearing into the fortress-like structure behind them. The crew stood in stunned silence, unable to comprehend the full gravity of what had just occurred. As the night stretched on, Linda found herself alone in her quarters, staring out at the alien planet through the small window. The stars seemed so distant now, as if their significance had diminished in the face of the overwhelming power of the Zorath. The decision weighed heavily on her mind. She had always believed that humanity's strength came from its ability to choose its own path, to remain independent. But now the idea of joining forces with the Zorath seemed almost inevitable. Was this the right thing to do? Or were they walking into a trap they would never escape? Down the hall, Thomas paced back and forth, unable to sleep. "What if we're making the wrong choice, Linda?" he asked when he found her standing by the window. "What if we're just handing over our future to them?" Linda turned to face him. "I don't know, but we don't have much time. Whatever we choose, it will change everything." They both knew that whatever decision they made would shape the future of humanity. They had to decide whether to join the Zorath, take the power they offered, and fight for survival, or risk everything and stand alone against the galaxy's growing dangers. As the stars shimmered outside, they both realized that there was no easy answer. The fate of Earth, and perhaps the entire galaxy, would rest on the choice they made in the coming hours. Humanity prepares. The quiet of the night was broken by a sense of urgency. Humanity had never faced a decision so profound, and the weight of it pressed heavily on every leader, every scientist, every citizen who knew what was at stake. Earth had never before been on the brink of such a monumental choice. It was no longer just about exploring the stars or making contact with an alien species. It was about choosing survival, power, and perhaps a new destiny. The Zorath had given humanity until dawn to decide. One simple, crucial question remained. Would humanity join the Zorath Empire or stand alone, risking everything? Across Earth, world leaders scrambled to form a response. The United Nations convened an emergency meeting, with representatives from every nation gathered in a digital summit. Tensions ran high as debates raged over whether to accept the Zorath's offer or to reject it. Some argued that aligning with the Zorath would give Earth the resources and military might to protect itself from an increasingly hostile universe. Others, however, feared that becoming part of the Zorath Empire would come with strings attached, strings that would strangle Earth's independence. Dr. Linda Everett, along with Thomas and the other crew members aboard the ship, watched the debates unfold in real time. It was a strange feeling to know that the decision was no longer in their hands. They had carried the weight of the initial response, but now, humanity itself would have to decide. Linda had spent years working for this moment, but now that it had arrived, she felt more uncertain than ever. The message from the Zorath was clear. They wanted humanity's strength, but Linda knew that the Zorath were not a benevolent species. They were desperate, and desperate creatures could be dangerous. At the Space Command Center, teams of scientists, military leaders, and diplomats worked tirelessly to prepare for all eventualities. No matter what the final decision was, there was no going back. If Earth refused the Zorath, they might find themselves with nothing but enemies, isolated and alone in a galaxy that was rapidly changing. But if they accepted the Zorath's offer, they might find themselves as pawns in a galactic war, a war that might consume everything they held dear. Linda knew this was just the beginning. But as the human ship prepared to rejoin the fight, she couldn't help but feel a surge of pride. Humanity had just faced its first battle in a galaxy at war, and they had survived. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were fighting back. The universe was watching, and humanity was ready to prove that they would never back down. The ultimate revelation. The battle had been fierce, but humanity's resilience had won the day. The Athish were forced into a retreat, but Linda knew that this wasn't a victory in the traditional sense. It wasn't the end of the war. It was just the beginning of something much larger. The Zorath had been proven wrong about humanity in one crucial way. Humanity was not just capable of survival. They were capable of more. They could change the tides of war, not just as allies of the Zorath, but as a force in their own right. As the human ship hovered above the battered Zorath flagship, Linda and the crew were left with an eerie sense of calm. They had won their first battle, but the enemy was far from defeated. The Athish would regroup, and they would come back stronger, more determined than ever. This was just a small skirmish in a much larger conflict, and Linda knew that humanity could no longer afford to be passive. "We've won today," Linda said, standing at the helm of the ship as the crew gathered around. "But we know that war is far from over. What happens next depends on all of us, on how we stand together and face what's coming." The Athish are not the only enemy we'll face. The galaxy is full of dangers we cannot even imagine. The Zorath, though grateful, remained silent, their cold eyes still hiding their true feelings. They had been saved, but the human ship had played a crucial role in the victory. Without humanity's intervention, the Zorath fleet would have fallen. The realization was hard for the Zorath to accept, perhaps because they were not used to seeing another species stand side by side with them. But now, the truth had become undeniable. "We cannot let them down," Linda continued, her voice firm. "Our decision to stand with the Zorath was not just about fighting for survival. It's about protecting the galaxy from forces that could destroy everything we know. We must be prepared for what's to come. The Athish may not be our only enemy, but they are the one we need to defeat first." As the crew absorbed her words, something shifted within them. It wasn't just the victory that mattered. It was what they had learned about themselves. Humanity was not a species just waiting for someone else to save them. They had shown that they could rise to any challenge, even when the odds seemed impossible. They had proven their strength, their resilience, and their potential. As Linda stood before the crew, she felt a shift in herself too. The fear that had once clouded her mind was gone. They had faced the unknown, and they had survived. Together. But now, she realized, their real challenge was yet to come. They had seen how fragile peace could be, how quickly war could turn the tide of the galaxy. They had chosen their side, and in doing so, had shaped the future of countless other species. "We've made our mark," Linda said, more to herself than anyone else. "We've shown that humanity has the strength to stand against the darkness of the universe. But our journey is far from over. The future we fight for, it's one we create. We've given the galaxy something it hasn't seen before: hope." In the distance, the lights of the Zorath homeworld flickered in the darkness of space. It was a world scared by war, but not without hope. The battle had been won, but the war was still ongoing, and every species in the galaxy now looked to Earth for guidance. For the first time, humanity was no longer an insignificant planet on the edge of the galaxy. They were a rising force, a species capable of changing the course of galactic history. The crew, silent but resolute, knew that the next steps would be difficult. There would be more battles, more sacrifices, and more questions to answer. But they also knew that they were no longer just pawns in someone else's game. They were players. They had chosen their place in the galaxy, and they would fight for it, no matter the cost. Linda stood before the command deck, staring at the holographic map that displayed the rapidly approaching enemy fleet. The Zorath were preparing for a large-scale invasion of their home planet, and humanity's mission was clear: protect the Zorath at all costs. The enemy, a ruthless force known as the Athish, had already swept through countless worlds. The Athish were an unstoppable army, their motives shrouded in mystery, but their power was undeniable. The Zorath had been fighting them for centuries, and losing. Now they were counting on humanity to tip the scales. The human fleet was small compared to the Athish's, but it was fast, agile, and most importantly, equipped with the advanced Zorath weapons. It was humanity's first real test in the galaxy, and the crew knew it would be their defining moment. Would Earth's strength be enough to turn the tide? Or would this be the moment when humanity learned that their place in the galaxy wasn't as secure as they had hoped? The first wave of enemy ships appeared on the radar. They were massive, warships that seemed to blot out the stars. The Athish were not here for diplomacy or negotiation. They were here to destroy. Their ships were sleek, dark, and heavily armed, each one bristling with weapons designed to annihilate entire planets. The Zorath had never faced anything like it, and humanity had never fought anything so advanced. "Get ready, everyone." Linda's voice came over the intercom, her tone firm but calm. "This is it. We fight for our survival, and for the Zoraths. Stay sharp. We can do this." The crew scrambled to their stations, each of them tense but focused. This wasn't just a battle for survival. It was a battle for humanity's place in the galaxy. If they lost, they would be nothing more than a footnote in a forgotten war. But if they won, they would show the universe that humanity could stand toe-to-toe with the galaxy's most powerful empires. As the Athish ships neared, the battle began. The human ship, aided by the Zorath's advanced technology, moved swiftly through the chaos. Blasts of energy flew across the void, striking the enemy with devastating force. But the Athish were relentless. Their warships fired back with terrifying precision, each shot calculated to destroy. The human ship's shields flared with each hit, but it held strong. Linda gripped the controls, her eyes narrowed as she maneuvered the ship through the debris field, avoiding incoming fire. It was a dance of life and death. Every second counted. She could feel the adrenaline coursing through her, but her mind was focused on one thing: victory. "Captain, the enemy is closing in on the Zorath flagship," Thomas called out, his voice tinged with panic. "We need to help them." Linda didn't hesitate. "Take us in. Full speed ahead. We're not leaving them to fight alone." The human ship surged forward, cutting through the chaos. The Zorath flagship, once a symbol of power, was now under siege by multiple Athish warships. Its hull was scared and smoking, but it wasn't destroyed yet. The Zorath crew aboard the flagship were fighting back with everything they had, but they were outnumbered. The human ship arrived just in time. Linda ordered all weapons to fire, and the ship's guns blazed to life, cutting through the enemy ships with deadly accuracy. The Athish warships faltered, their shields weakening as the human ship unleashed everything it had. The tide of the battle began to shift. "We've got them on the run," Thomas said, his voice filled with relief. "They're retreating." But the victory was short-lived. A sudden explosion rocked the human ship. A massive Athish warship, hidden in the chaos, had launched a surprise attack. The ship's hull groaned under the impact, and the crew was thrown from their stations as alarms blared throughout the ship. "Status report," Linda shouted, her voice sharp. She quickly regained control, her hand steady despite the sudden chaos. "We're damaged, but it's not critical," the engineer replied. "We can keep going." Linda's heart pounded as she looked out at the battlefield. The Athish had retreated, temporarily, but it was clear that this was only the beginning. The real war had just begun. As the crew steadied the ship, preparing for the next wave, Linda's mind raced. The battle they had just fought was only a taste of what was to come. The Zorath were right. The universe was growing darker. The Athish would return, and they would not stop until every civilization was wiped out. But humanity had proven something today. They were not afraid to stand up and fight. They had joined the war not just for their own survival, but for the survival of the Zorath, and perhaps for every other species in the galaxy. They had shown that humanity was capable of more than anyone had expected, more than even the Zorath had imagined. "Linda," Thomas said, his voice cutting through her thoughts, "what do you think we should do? I've never felt more unsure in my life. I can't see a way out of this." She turned to him, her face filled with the exhaustion of the long days that had led to this point. "I don't know, Thomas. I honestly don't. But what I do know is that we have to trust that humanity will make the right choice. It's not just about power or survival. It's about who we want to be as a species. If we join the Zorath, it's no longer just about us. We'll be part of something bigger, and we can't take that lightly. But if we refuse them, we might find a way to stay true to ourselves." As the night wore on, the crew spent hours discussing their options. They each brought their own perspectives and concerns, but Linda found herself thinking more and more about what this would mean for Earth's future. No matter what, humanity would be forever changed. But could they endure the consequences of aligning with the Zorath? Meanwhile, back on Earth, there was no easy answer. Governments scrambled to find common ground. The military pushed for the acceptance of the Zorath's offer, arguing that it was the only way to secure Earth's future. Diplomats urged caution, warning that humanity might lose its soul in exchange for protection. Religious leaders spoke of the moral implications, saying that the decision to align with the Zorath was one that could affect the future of humanity's very identity. In the early hours of the morning, just before the deadline, Linda and the crew received a final chilling message from the Zorath. "We wait for your decision. The hour is nearly upon you. The universe will not wait for you to decide." The weight of their words settled over the crew like a heavy fog. The Zorath were watching. They weren't asking for a simple yes or no. They were testing humanity's resolve, and they had no patience for hesitation. Linda stood up and walked to the observation window, staring out at the alien planet below. Its surface was covered in the scars of war, its cities darkened by years of conflict. She felt a pang of sadness for the Zorath, who had once been a proud empire, and for humanity, who now stood at the crossroads of a decision that could change the galaxy forever. "I think we need to make a decision," she said quietly, turning to Thomas. "We can't keep waiting. This is our moment, and we have to decide who we want to be. Do we take their power and run the risk of losing ourselves, or do we stand firm, even if it means facing an uncertain future?" Thomas nodded, his expression grave. "It's up to all of us, isn't it? Every person on Earth has a stake in this. We've been given a chance to shape the future of humanity." Linda took a deep breath, her hands trembling slightly as she prepared to send the final message back to the Zorath. The crew stood around her in silence, each of them bracing for the impact of the decision they were about to make. "We'll answer them," she said firmly. "But we're not making this choice lightly. We will prove that humanity is not just strong, but capable of forging its own destiny. We won't be their pawns. We will join them, but on our terms." With that, Linda sent the message. "We have made our decision." The message read, "Humanity will stand with the Zoreth, but not as subjects. We will join your cause, but we will not lose ourselves in the process. If you are willing to accept that, we are ready to fight alongside you." The response came almost immediately. "You have chosen wisely. Prepare for what comes next." The crew looked at each other, a mix of relief and fear on their faces. They had made their choice, but what would that mean for the future? As they prepared for the next phase of their mission, they all knew one thing. No matter what came next, humanity was stepping into a new era. One where their strength would be tested, their future uncertain, but their place in the galaxy forever changed. The battle begins. The morning came with an eerie stillness. The decision had been made. Humanity would align with the Zoreth, but not as submissive allies. They would stand beside the Zoreth, united against the growing darkness in the universe, but they would not be pawns. This was humanity's chance to shape their own destiny, and the crew knew that what followed would set the course for the rest of history. The Zoreth were waiting. The human ship, now equipped with advanced Zoreth technology, had received a new mission. It was no longer just a diplomatic envoy. It had transformed into a military force, capable of holding its own in a battle that no one on Earth had ever imagined. The humans were going to war, not against the Zoreth, but for them. The galaxy was growing darker, and the enemies that had once decimated the Zoreth Empire were now coming for Earth. The crew stood ready, but none of them could have predicted what lay ahead. As the ship prepared for its next journey, Linda looked out at the stars. They were no longer just distant points of light. They were beacons, reminders of the future humanity could create. The universe was vast and unknown, but humanity was ready to meet it. They were ready to prove that they belonged among the stars. The war was not over. It had just begun. But as Linda took one last look at the horizon of the Zoreth homeworld, she knew that humanity's place in the galaxy had been secured. They had proven that they were a force to be reckoned with, and no matter what came next, they would face it together.